Of all the main characters of Avatar The Last Airbender, most have statues in the Legend of Korra as monuments not just to their skill and their thoughtfulness and their ultimate achievements, but as a testament to how those achievements can continue to inspire and motivate the citizens of the present. Aang has an enormous statue in the harbor. It's the equivalent of the Statue of Liberty in both its size and its symbolic majesty and significance. Zuko and Sokka have smaller but still noble and stately statues. Sokka was the head of the council, it seems, for quite a few years, and Zuko, of course, was the Fire Lord for decades before he handed the position to his daughter, Azumi. Toph has quite a few statues. She has a very formidable and slightly austere-looking statue there in Republic City to commemorate her being the chief of police and a major figure in the justice system of the United Republic. And in Zaofu, the city started by her daughter, Suyin, there is an enormous gleaming statue dedicated to her achievements in metal bending. It's an impressive statue, almost classical in its grandeur, its idealism, its orderly, gracious beauty. It's a very different perception of Toph from what we see in Republic City, but nonetheless an equal representation of her legacy. But where's the Katara statue? There isn't one. Not that we see, at any rate, in The Legend of Korra. Now, it's possible that a future Avatar show will correct this or retcon it in somehow, because this has been an element of the show that Katara fans have complained about. But I think it feels right. Not right in that it makes me feel good, but right in that, for better or worse, it reflects, number one, the motivation behind statue making, why these statues exist, what they serve to do, and number two, following that point, what these characters accomplished in the world, and to what extent those accomplishments are valued by posterity. Before I go much further, I think I should pose the question of why do statues of heroic figures exist? Statues are, of course, not neutral representations of history. They are monuments of honor and thoughtfulness and resonance. What figures deserve to be thought of highly? What figures deserve to be regarded highly? The value of statues is not particularly to the past. I don't think the spirit of Abraham Lincoln would be particularly moved one way or the other about statues of him. Statues exist for posterity. They seek to remind the people of the present all humming about in their routine, mundane lives, of the figures that deserve respect, that deserve to be valued, that deserve to be thought of not just as relics of the past, to be viewed in a museum or critically evaluated with cold, impartial indifference, but viewed as an example worth following. Statues are not about goodness, necessarily. There are a lot of good people in the world then and now. They don't get a statue. There's not enough space in the world for statues of all of them. And we shouldn't necessarily think about whether someone still deserves to have a statue by thinking, are they a good person, necessarily? Were they always nice and kind and considerate? But rather, were they great? I'm not saying greatness is necessarily better or more important than goodness, but goodness can be found anywhere, in a lot of people, in a lot of forms of life in general. But greatness is much rarer. It is a quality that does not belong to the chaotic, disorienting rush of ordinary life. It is a symbol of accomplishment, of thoughtfulness, of cunning, of intellect, of people who matter for what they've done, or what they've written, or what they've accomplished. And it is that greatness that we do not just hold aloft as saying, oh wow, they really did a lot, but instead, at our best, we look at these statues of these great figures and don't think, oh, I want to be just like them, because number one, that's not possible, and number two, that's not particularly advisable, because again, all these figures are not necessarily good people, but rather, what can I learn from the accomplishments and the best qualities of the figures of the past? Whatever their faults, they had something, some intensity of feeling, some purity of spirit, some far-sightedness of mind that is worth bringing into the present. And it can illuminate our unremarkable and honestly rather parochial lives with that spark of aspiring to accomplishments that have real literary or artistic or political significance. Thomas Carlyle talks a lot about heroism and hero worship, and he sets out a lot of the ideas I have briefly overviewed, albeit with much more of his Germanic, arguably over-the-top flair. Carlyle does not necessarily want everyone to try to be just like the heroes of the past, to copy them in anything, or to uncritically revere them necessarily, but just to think that they did things, they accomplished feats of thoughtfulness, of wit, of cunning, of daring, of planning and determination. They were smart. They were pure individuals who developed their own coherent senses of self apart from the mundane detritus of the world, and so accomplished important feats. That's a major reason that Carlyle believes that these figures should be valued, especially in the rather enervated and disorienting age of industrialization. Aang, Sokka, Zuko, and Toph are all known to posterity. They all continue to have great relevance in the present. That does not mean they are without flaws. The show goes into their flaws in great detail. But they have all become famous for their accomplishments, not just in the course of Avatar, but significantly after the show. The feats they have done, the actions they've accomplished through sheer will and hopeful passion and endless daring. What is Katara known for? Genuinely. In The Legend of Korra, what is Katara known for? She's known as being a great healer. That's good. That's respectable. One could mention that Katara specifically did not want to only be a healer, as she mentions back in Avatar, but that aside, there's nothing innately wrong with being a thoughtful healer, with trying to alleviate the wounds and sufferings of others. But also, she is known as the wife of the Avatar and the mother of Tenzin, and to a lesser extent, Aang's other two children. This makes a lot of people uncomfortable, and I'm not going to say that they are wrong to feel that way. I don't think the show is sexist necessarily. And I don't think that Katara needs to be this political leader and constantly grasp the public spotlight in order to have value. There's nothing wrong with what happens to her over the course of the 70 years between Avatar and Korra. But let's not be dishonest about what does seem to happen, which is that she retreats to the background a bit. She's not completely forgotten. People still know and respect her, but she is not a major public figure. She did not accomplish the kinds of feats that people tend to erect statues for. People can look at Toph and think, wow, she took the chaos that was early Republic City and created order out of it and established a sense of clarity and a sense of cohesion and a sense of justice through her work at the police department. And she invented this entire new form of bending that has had an enormous influence after the events of Avatar, and even led to this towering, gleaming utopian city being founded. One can't really say that about Katara. I'm not criticizing Katara necessarily, and I'm not necessarily saying it's right that she doesn't have an enormous statue in her honor. Perhaps we should value healing and Katara's role as a maternal figure both to her own children and to, it seems, the Southern Water Tribe at large as worth honoring. But nonetheless, for better and worse, the world does not really work that way. That does not tend to be why we build statues. A lot of people have said that the writers shafted Katara a bit for not giving her that heroic role that the others had. And I understand that complaint. And I understand that Katara, considering how fiery and how dark and how genuinely morally ambiguous she could be at times in the pursuit of her wild, extremely passionate and fervent desires, is largely known in the times of Legend of Korra as Aang's wife. Nonetheless, he had to lead the world, he had to lead the Air Nation, and he had to focus his efforts on Tenzin, his one airbending child. That leaves Katara with a lot of the less glamorous duties of domestic life, and far less time to be a noble, heroic figure like the others were. And yeah, that's tragic perhaps, but if it's tragic, it's not the kind of doom and gloom, Gothic spires and paroxysms of lightning and vampiric howls kind of tragedy. It's tragic because of how subtle it is. No one's really in the wrong here. Katara seems loved Aang, and he loved her, and they got married and had kids. And because of Aang's burdens as the Avatar, he did not spend as much time with his family as he really should have, especially his two other kids besides Tenzin. And that meant that most of the responsibilities for that side of life fell on Katara, and she likely did not have all of the opportunities to really accomplish these daring feats of public life as the others did. And so she does not have a statue, and she really does not seem to be, even besides that, as famous and renowned as the other members of Team Avatar. Even the three kids, Aang and Katara's kids, do tend to talk about Aang much more than about Katara. Part of that is because Katara is still alive, but it very much does seem like their deceased father carries an enormous weight in all of their minds. And Katara, it seems, though not forgotten, was not as important to the grand scope of history. She didn't do the kinds of things that people erect statues for. That's not her fault. And perhaps it's wrong that the domestic side of life does not get rewarded as much as the heroic, grandiose, fire and lightning and public side of life, with all its grandeur and its ornate majesty. And perhaps it is also wrong that Aang was so focused on his public obligations that Katara had to spend a lot of her time looking after the whole domestic side. It's a bit uncomfortable, I will fully admit. I want to end this story on a happy note, but I think we should applaud the show for being honest. It's uncomfortable and it's meant to be. That's a phrase I say a lot in regards to The Legend of Korra, and I think it's true here as well. Katara is no less brave or no less thoughtful and no less daring and no less passionate than the other members of Team Avatar. But for a lot of small reasons that add up, she did not really have the opportunity, it seems, to make the kinds of grandiose accomplishments as an adult that stuck in the public consciousness in regards to the other members of Team Avatar and resulted in their being enshrined in statues. So thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can and you want to see more videos like this before anyone else. Obviously, I don't mean to imply that Katara did nothing but raise their children, but every choice made is a choice made not to do something else. Katara's time was, it seems, largely occupied in the care of those 3 kids, and that left her less time to do other things. But if you have other opinions, if you agree with me or don't, sound off in the comments. Like, comment, subscribe. Take care. Tune in soon for next video. Adios, comrades.